First of all, I'd like to thank the association so much for the invitation to be here, and my cabinet colleague, Minister for Health. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation for you, but I'm going to talk about gender, health, and climate change. We oftentimes, when this topic crops up, the question comes in: what's gender got to do with climate change? What is the correlation between gender and climate change? We've seen what, with the presentations of my colleagues previously, the impact of climate change on nations like ours, and varying complications, challenges all over the world, and we have our own unique challenges here in the Pacific. The effects of climate change on us as a nation and our ability to mitigate and adapt to that, it can be affected, it is affected by social, cultural factors, gender norms, and differences in vulnerability. It is important to highlight that the differences in vulnerability arises from multidimensional and cultural inequalities and discriminations in our homes, our communities, and society. These differences shape differential risks from climate change. People who are socially, economically, culturally, politically, institutionally, or otherwise marginalized are especially vulnerable to climate change and also to some adaptation and mitigation responses. And in most cases, this would be women and girls. Climate change, we all know, affects our health in profoundly adverse ways as it affects some of the most fundamental necessities of human life. Talk about health, food, air, water, and the direct effects of hazards such as heat waves, floods, and storms and cyclones, infectious disease patterns, disruptions of agricultural and other supportive ecosystems, and potentially population displacement and shortage of resources such as clean water, sanitation, fertile land, crops, and fisheries, and the list goes on. So during climate-related disasters, women and girls may suffer disproportionate mortality rates, and survivors experience decreased life expectancy. Women are more prone to nutritional deficiencies because of their unique nutritional needs, especially when they're pregnant or breastfeeding. For girls and women, poor nutritional status is associated with an increased prevalence of anemia, pregnancy, and delivery problems. And I think for us as a nation, we all saw the stories post-Winston, some of the stories that came from all over Fiji about women being pregnant, trying to get to health centers in the height of labor. And increased rates of intrauterine growth retardation, low birth weight, and prenatal mortality. Anemia is also associated with cognitive impairments, you'd all know, including poor attention span, diminished working memory, and poor educational outcomes. So for pregnant and lactating women, they also face additional challenges as they have an increased need for food, nutrition, and their mobility is limited. Globally, at any given time, I understand that the average of 18 to 20% of the reproductive age population is either pregnant or lactating. So for women and girls also, and here we also have statistics in Fiji to show that post-natural disasters, there's a higher risk of physical, sexual, and domestic violence in the aftermath of natural disasters. And women are at a higher risk in these particular circumstances. Psychological stress likely to be heightened after disasters, particularly where families are displaced and have to live in evacuation centers. If we're to look at the Pacific, for Vanuatu, for example, there was a recorded 300% increase in domestic violence cases reported after 2 tropical cyclones in 2011. And for Fiji, post-Winston, if we were to look at the number of complaints for assaults, violence against women, for the 3 years, 2013 to 2015, an annual average of 368 cases a year. That's for the average for the 3 years. Cyclone Winston hit us in 2016, and the stats show that for 2016, this went up to 652 for that year alone. So there's a direct correlation between natural disasters and the heightened violence against women. And I believe there was also a rapid public health risk assessment post-Winston report by the Ministry of Health and Medical Services and WHO. I understand one of the authors is in the room today as well, that also recognize the correlation between natural disasters and heightened violence against women post-disasters. So what is or what have we done as a government, as stakeholders that look after the interests of women and girls in particular post-disasters? I think there is what you call a protection cluster that was formed, a safety and protection cluster that was formed particularly to look at the vulnerabilities of women and girls post-disaster. And after Winston, in particular, when they set up these evacuation centers, there were also safe spaces for women with the relevant support systems, whether it be counseling or even access to menstrual hygiene packs during the natural disasters. When we look at the humanitarian response to disasters, we normally think about food, the distribution of food and first aid. What we have had to adapt in that respect is the introduction of dignity packs, which is basically hygiene products, right down to pads that would often slip the list, get off the list from the humanitarian response to natural disasters. And this was very evident post-Winston, particularly when there was a mechanism that was put in place through the safety and protection cluster that was looking particularly at the interests of women and girls post-disasters. So what can, I'll take us for a minute to the international response. Our climate champion, Honorable Minister for Defense, has talked about COP23. And I like to say one of the highlights of COP23 is under Fiji's presidency, for the first time, there was a launch of the Gender Action Plan. It is basically what makes it so important is that it recognizes the unique contribution of women into climate diplomacy at the international level, and it encourages countries, nationally, internationally, to include women in the UNFCCC process. And when we bring it down to a national level, it brings to the fore the unique perspectives that women can bring to the table when we're talking about risk, adaptation, mitigation, climate change policies, basically. So apart from the Gender Action Plan, we also have the Sendai Framework on Disaster Risk Reduction 2015 to 2030, which emphasizes that women and their participation are critical to effectively managing disaster risk and designing, resourcing, and implementing gender-sensitive disaster risk reduction programs. So a key challenge for us as policymakers, practitioners, stakeholders is to ensure the mainstreaming of gender considerations in climate investment decision-making processes and programs. We've heard about, we saw some statistics from Honorable Minister for Infrastructure about our national aims in relation to green energy. Just again, I'd like to use the example we have nationally and within the ministry, initiatives that are in place to support our national aims to reduce, to get 100% renewable energy, the renewable energy aim, 100% by 2036. What are we doing in that space? We have a project called the Barefoot College. It's basically, we're starting constructions in this current year. It's a school that will be built in Vuniwaqa, and it's specifically for women. You would have seen the statistics about the rollout of solar home systems throughout Fiji, and it's increasing year by year. So the idea behind the Barefoot College is to train women from these communities to become solar engineers. So they go back and they maintain the solar systems that government is installing in most of our rural villages. It's a partnership between the government of Fiji and government of India through the Barefoot College. The exciting thing about this training program is that women will not get any certification at the end of the day. They get the capacity, they don't get the certification, because the idea is that they go back to the communities they come from and they maintain the systems within those communities, and it's already working now. We've got 17 solar engineers who have been trained under the Barefoot model from India. 5 of these 17 will become trainers in the Barefoot College in Vuniwaqa. And already the EFL has been trying to get these women to come and work. And that was the reason behind why Barefoot College in India said that one of the conditions of this is that they do not get the certification, even though they have the knowledge, so that they remain in the communities. And they've come up with a financing mechanism to ensure that they become independent income-wise, but at the same time remain within the communities to assist government in this particular initiative. Again, just in conclusion, the differing impacts of climate change on women and girls, and what we're doing, not only government, but particularly the non-government sector. They're big on this, and they've partnered with us very well post-Winston, and it's an ongoing thing. We have a gender and climate desk under the ministry, which brings in all this expertise that's outside of government to put together programs and initiatives that would assist us as a nation better tackle the impact of climate change, particularly on women and girls. And when we talk about the differential impacts of climate change on women and girls, if these women and girls disabled, for example, if they're living with a disability, that just becomes it further exacerbates the impact of climate change on them. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, that is why we have gender and climate change. The reason being that the impact on women and girls, it's seen through statistics all over the world, and particularly in Fiji as well, that post-disasters, there is a heightened impact on women and girls from the effects of climate change. Vinaka.